This podcast is brought to you by the Albany Public Library main branch and the generosity of listeners like you. What is a podcast? God, Daddy, these people talk as much as you do. Razib Khan's Unsupervised Learning.
Thanks for listening to the ungated version of the Unsupervised Learning podcast. If you want to read some essays on some of these topics, please check out razib.substack.com. Again, that's razib.substack.com. Thank you.
Hey everybody, this is Razib Khan with the Unsupervised Learning podcast, and I am here with my friend Andrew Song. Just as way of introduction, I met Andrew at Hereticon last, it was late fall, and, Chatham House rules, can't talk about, what we talked about there. But, we met each other in social situations. We chatted, we talked, and we, kind of know each other as acquaintances, I would say. And we were just having a discussion about various topics. And Andrew, was talking about, what he's doing, what he's working on. I thought it was interesting enough for the podcast. Now, people have asked me to bring on someone that's talked about climate change. Okay. And I haven't, mostly because it's just not part of something. It's not something that I really read about or know about very much. I'm not going to lie. I used to actually pay a lot of attention to it in the 1990s and late 80s before it was cool. And to be honest, it got to be a highly politicized debate, and I just kind of don't want to deal with it. A lot of it seems to be symbolic virtue signaling, targeting carbon emission goals that no one ever expects to reach. Like Europe is reducing its emissions while China and India are just cranking them up. It's just the whole thing seems irrational, actually. But Andrew is in this space, and he's quite a rational person, from what I know. And I'm going to let him talk a lot today. I know that some of you are like, "Oh, Razib, you interrupt," blah blah blah. But I'm probably not going to be interrupting too much because I don't know. I'm going to be listening a lot. And Andrew, can you introduce yourself? Like, tell the listener a little bit about who you are, and then we're going to get into it about climate change and where we are in 2025.
Sure. So my name is Andrew Song, born and raised in San Jose, California. Have a background in tech, worked for more notable firms just like Scale AI, but also, Drop.com, which is an e-commerce site, Indiegogo, which is a crowdfunding site, but kind of stumbled into climate change tech because the writing's kind of on the wall. The houses are catching on fire or they're going underwater. And quite frankly, you kind of touched upon it. There's been this politicalization of climate change. People virtue signaling a lot about how the world should be run, but really no results have been implemented. One thing I want to touch upon is that we're currently at 1.5 C, and this is something that the international community of scientists have said that this is like a tipping point where we should say, "Oh shit! Like something bad is happening here." Like the alarm bells are ringing. We have to do something. And there's a Paris Agreement essentially where a bunch of countries got together and saying, "This is the tipping point that we do not pass," and we've passed it. We've sustained this temperature for over a year now, and so I'm trying to understand since the 90s what has been going on. It's not planting trees. It's not switching from plastic straws to paper straws. It's not all this virtue signaling that has, quite frankly, it hasn't done anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just look at the scoreboard. Global temperatures going up and to the right. And so this is why we started this company called Make Sunsets. Essentially, it's a form of geoengineering. And what we do is we copy what volcanoes do. Volcanoes have actually been cooling the planet for millions of years. And the only times in actual history where we've actually affected the climate of the global temperatures has been world wars, pandemics, and volcanoes. Those are the three. And I can jump into why those three affect global temperatures, but obviously I don't want a world war to happen again. I don't want another pandemic to happen again that we just went through. So volcanoes are the safest bet right now. And to be clear, this is a very insane idea. And this is why I was invited to Hereticon to talk about this. But now we have over 840 customers. We've raised a little bit under $2 million. Tomas Puyo is an investor who was also at Hereticon.
Big guy at Substack.
Yeah, big guy in Substack. We've got Draper Associates. Tim Draper gave us some money. Adam Draper, his son, gave us some money as well. We're both YC founders ourselves, myself and Luke Eisman, my co-founder and CEO. And so we've got this weird momentum going right now because I think people are fed up by all the excuses that we've been making about climate change. And clearly there hasn't been any results because we're at the highest, we've been breaking global temperatures records for the past 2 years now. And scientists don't have a good reason why, which is even scarier. Or they argue over how fast it's actually warming, which is even scarier. They're saying directionally it's getting hotter, but they can't decide how hot or how fast it's getting hotter. And so we know that geoengineering works because, again, we did it back in 1991. So I'll stop there and maybe you can start, firing off some questions based off what I said. But give it a quick overview.
We're gonna go deep into this, but so I guess I will say, as the late Stephen Schneider wrote a lot of different books. There's a lot of books on climate change I read when I was a kid, and I would read the stuff. And my perspective that I'm going to tell the listener is, as a kid, I'm talking like 8, 9, like pretty early, I was super interested in this sort of stuff. The main problem that I have with climate change and with environmental discourse is the catastrophism, and just kind of like the sky is falling, and the sky does sometimes fall. But
Yeah.
as the population bomb made all these predictions that didn't work out. It's not
Worst
like
book ever.
everything is hunky. Yeah, not like everything's hunky dory. I will tell you, I'm from Oregon, and in Western Oregon, the Willamette Valley, south of Portland. Like I went to college in Eugene, Oregon. I've spent a lot of time in Eugene, Oregon, over the years, back and forth. As, some of you might know, but when I was, in the mid '90s, when I first went to Eugene in the winter, like on the steps on campus, there was a green covering of slime. It was like some sort of algae, and it's because it's like wet. And what would happen is, during the summer, it would dry up a little bit, but it could like maintain itself to the next season.
Right.
Couple of years ago, I had a discussion with a friend of mine who's a postdoc. He's from the Bay Area. He was a postdoc at University of Oregon. I was having lunch with him, and I was telling him, some of the changes I noticed. One of the things is like, have you noticed that there's no green slime like on the stairs anymore, on the stone stairs, like all around campus? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, yeah, you don't know what I'm talking, because you're new. And what happened was the summer started getting too hot.
Right.
And so that I think it's like some form of algae. It would basically just like bake away and disappear to the point where it wasn't any of it for the next season. And so now the winters, like, you don't have that green slime. So people who live in areas affected by climate change within the last generation, they see these little things. Obviously, I have friends. I've lived in California for a while. You're from California. Napa Valley is very close to where you are. You don't need to tell the vintners. You don't need to tell the people who own these vineyards and the scientists that work in related to grapes and wine, which University of California, Davis, where I went to graduate school, the Mondavi Center, it's like a big deal there. They're tracking all this climate change very, very closely. I don't know, in the future, if the San Juan Valley in SoCal, like by Santa Barbara, is going to be able to do wine. And so the people in Napa are. Are going to adapt. I'm from Oregon again. Like I can tell you, red wine, the Merlots and other things that are grown in Willamette Valley today. Like a generation ago, it was all white wine territory because of the temperature and stuff like that. And so, okay, so we know that changes are happening. You say 1.5 degrees Celsius. Why should we tell me okay. The literature better than me. Like I want you to know, like, the predictions from the year 2000. We're 25 years in. Like, what's going on? Like, what did they get wrong? What were their confidence intervals? I remember AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She and some people around her were saying that the world was going to end or something in 2030. Some stupid stuff. That's obviously not going to happen. But tell us, like, how the predictions have fared, what they got wrong, what they got right, and where we're going, say, the next 25 years to 2050.
So it's a thing that's like, it's ever changing, and that's why they call it climate change too. Is that global temperatures have been increasing, and it's because it's tied to the amount of carbon emissions that have been injected into our atmosphere. And so, carbon dioxide is what is called a greenhouse gas. So what that means is that it actually traps heat. And this was proved back, I believe, in the 1800s, where a woman scientist essentially just put a glass globe, injected some CO2 into it with a thermometer, and then another globe with just air. And then she shined a light on both these globes, one with the CO2 in it with the thermometer in it, and one without CO2 in it with the thermometer. And they saw that the globe with the CO2 actually trapped more heat than the one without any CO2. And so this has been a known thing for a while. And right now, what we're at is, I believe about 426 parts per million. So it's still a very small amount of CO2 that we have in our atmosphere, but it's steadily been climbing because of the carbon emissions that we emit. And this comes from mostly comes from our just humans doing their thing, and that's coal power plants, engine emissions, industrial activities, a lot of different things. Farming is another huge CO2 emitter. And so the thing that scientists, I think like scientists have directionally have been correct. The problem is I think when you look into the discourse, there's a huge they like to battle who has the best models and who has the best predictions of rate of warming. And so for the normal person, including myself, I was kind of same as you, Razib. I kind of I was a Boy Scout growing up. I cared about trees, I cared about the environment, leaving a place better than I found it. All that kind of stuff. I thought just recycling and turning off the lights at night was enough. But I didn't really pay attention to this discourse that was happening in the scientific community. But as I kept on drilling into it, the reason why there's so much confusion is because scientists aren't really great at communicating. They're also really bad at agreeing with each other because they want to be the right people. They want to say my model is correct because my inputs were the ones that were right. And so what happens is there's that discourse that happens. And for the common person like myself, including you, there's a massive amount of confusion. What do you mean? Don't you guys just, stick out a thermometer and measure this rate of warming and you could just see the difference. And it turns out that's not the thing. There's a lot of different variables that people consider and don't consider. And that's where the confusion comes. And that's at the very high level. And so I think that type of confusion from the communication is what causes this kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Apathy that kind of sets in. Is shit. Is what they're saying is actually real? Is it something that is actually happening? They can't agree upon each other. These are Harvard scientists. These are guys from Columbia. These are guys are from the top tier institutions in our world, and they can't even come to the same number. So that's where I think a lot of confusion happens. And at the same time, too, people have opinions on how to lower global temperatures. People think we need to just stop emitting fossil fuels or stop burning fossil fuels, but quite frankly, you can't. There's no world where we can survive where we stop burning fossil fuels tomorrow. And it's just this weird academia spin where it's this kind of degrowther set mentality, which is in my opinion kind of surprising. And so it kind of talked about the population bomb book. That was a one shot misinformation campaign that really prevented a lot of people my age. I'm 39 now. A lot of people my age to not have kids because they thought that, hey, we're all fucked. There should be no reason we should have kids. We don't want to bring a complete disaster, bring kids into this complete disaster. So that I think that gives a high level of what's been happening. And the thing though is that we have this solution, and this is what I'm working on. It's called stratospheric aerosol injection. We're just copying what volcanoes do. And it's been proven because we had satellite data to actually detect these volcanic eruptions, to actually see the global temperatures drop after these eruptions happened. And this was back in 1991. I was 6 years old. I don't know how old you were, Razib, but we both survived. The only people that perished were the 1,000+ people that were really close to the volcano. And so it's just kind of, it's why aren't we looking into this? And I can dive into why, but
okay. Here's a couple of things that are interesting. That I just want to throw out there. Mount Pinatubo, you talked about. I was a teenager. I remember. And we also know, was it like Krakatoa that caused like the years without summer?
Exactly.
And so the Toba explosion. So it turns out the Toba explosion is maybe not as impactful as we thought. It could. We're still, but the Toba explosion. Have you heard of it?
Mm-mm-mm. What year was
Okay,
that?
so it was the year was 70,000 BC, but
Okay.
but it was the Toba explosion was a volcanic explosion in northern Sumatra, I believe,
Mhm.
and there was a hypothesis that it was responsible for kind of like the repopulation of the world by out of Africa. Hypothesis probably wrong, but the point is, these volcanic eruptions do seem to be significant impacts on world macro history, on evolutionary history, and they come and go. If we had like a really big explosion, actually, there would be some issues in some parts of the world where I think famine would return. I mean, look, we
Absolutely.
in the United States will be fine. We've got high productivity. We have stores, and a lot of us are fat. So, I mean, we can
Natural
last a year.
Ozempic. Sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Sure.
yeah. We got natural Ozempic. But so like this has always been around. And another thing I always bring up with people, the Eemian interglacial. The Eemian interglacial 125,000 years ago, plus or minus 5,000 years, actually was warmer than we are now.
Mhm.
So we have like had warmer phases, and so I guess the question I would ask is, you're talking about acceleration and runaway greenhouse, like Venus, like these are the things that like I read about that people were worried about. On the other hand, there are people who are saying, well, there's going to be like we have life on this planet, Venus didn't, and so runaway greenhouse not going to happen, because what's going to happen is more plants are going to grow, and so there's going to be equilibration eventually, where it's going to be maybe at a higher level, but there's dampeners within the system. This is kind of related to the Gaia hypothesis that James Lovelock presented many, many decades ago. What do you? So I saw in your, because you sent me some notes, because I'm very, very green to this.
Mm-mm-mm.
Uh, what's your thoughts, and what is the current thinking on accelerated warming as opposed to just like linear increases?
It's 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 because of the different feedback loops that's concerning. Back you said 125,000 years ago, we didn't have, I don't think we had polar ice caps. We didn't have, the population that we have today. Um, and so it's that rate of warning and that shift change that's the most frightening part, I think. And I don't have a graph handy right now that I can pull up, but like it's the accelerated rate of warming has been kind of crazy, and that's that delta is what's the concerning part. I think previous times in history it's been fairly gradual, because with the back 125 years ago, I'm guessing, I don't know, don't quote me, but I'm guessing that it was a very gradual amount of CO2 that was introduced into the atmosphere that then slowly changed the world in terms of how the planet is. But since humans are so good at what they do, aka making stuff and producing things, that's where the problem lies. And so that's the big difference between now and 125,000 years ago.
So, well, uh, you were talking about fossil fuels, and obviously, there's still a lot of fossil fuels. On the other hand, with solar, revived interest in nuclear. I mean, we're kind of around. Do you think are we around peak fossil fuel? I know India hasn't totally come online with industrialization, but developed economies are dropping in terms
Yeah,
of their usage.
yeah, yeah. And so they have, like, Europe and the US have decoupled their emissions from their GDP in terms of CO2 footprint. But as you said, the rest of the world has not. In last year, China made more coal power plants than any year ever, ever. Like, so it's like, and coal's the really bad stuff. And so that's the stuff that really heats up the planet. India as well, they want to become the next superpower. And it would be hypocrisy to tell them you cannot use fossil fuels. Use the same playbook that the U.S. and the EU used in order to become superpowers, because that's the playbook everyone knows. Solar, yes, is getting incredibly cheap, but it's still hard to get that power from one place to another. And so the issue there is just the distribution of the power itself. Nuclear also is about 7 to 10 years away, which again is very hopeful, very promising. I'm glad that people are starting to realize that it's a viable energy source. But again, this time we have in between us making this transition happen from fossil fuels to more renewable energies is too late, too little. And so, I don't want to sound alarmist, but like, just look outside. LA, like I have a brother that lives in LA. He has two young kids with his wife. He had to evacuate because the smoke was so bad. Luckily, his house didn't burn down. But like, this wasn't happening 20 years ago. This wasn't happening. I never heard about a wildfire, just like how you said about the green moss, the green algae that you saw in the footsteps. These things weren't happening. And so, regardless of looking at charts and stuff, just look outside. And so what stratospheric aerosol injection is putting a stopgap solution to this. We're copying what volcanoes do. And to be clear, like you mentioned other volcanoes like, Krakatoa, which was too much, the year without summer. Pinatubo was the one that was the Goldilocks of volcanoes, which, kind of makes sense. Not too much, not too little. Because if you apply too much SO2, then it gets too cold. We will then fall into an ice age. Too little, nothing really happens.
Oh.
You slightly cool the Earth. But sorry.
No, make Pinatubo great again, though.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Make Pinatubo, because it was the right amount. It was 0.5 degrees Celsius, and it lasted for about a year. And so, as I said before, the rate of warming, depending again which scientists you ask, they say that every decade, the world warms by 0.25 degrees Celsius. Is roughly I think the most extreme, or maybe the most middle of the pack right now. For every decade, the world increases by 0.25 degrees Celsius. So literally one volcanic eruption reversed global warming by 2 decades, by 20 years, which is kind of mind blowing. This is just one shot. Like, we can do this better. like we can do this better. We can do it safely. We can apply less. We can be more accurate about this. Until, yeah.
Well, I mean, I want to ask here. I mean, because some people are going to be asking in the comments. They're just like, look, you got a seed stage startup. You're obviously passionate about this. So I feel like, the objection or the question that I would get from people is like, well, of course you're incentivized. You have a strong incentive to believe in this and to promote kind of like a catastrophist scenario. You want to raise your Series A.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the path to profitability with something like this. This is this is hard tech. Hard tech, like, that's capital intensive, I think. So you would want to raise money.
It's actually not.
Oh, it's not. It's not.
Super cheap. It's super cheap.
Oh, because it's basically putting. We know what the chemicals are.
Yeah, it's just SO2. SO2. So sulfur costs $100 to $200 per ton. So it's dirt cheap. And then the leverage is insane. 1 gram of sulfur dioxide in the stratosphere. So this is where double the height of commercial airliners fly, 66,000 feet above. That offsets a ton. So it's a 1 to million leverage. So you get a lot of bang for your buck for this. Sulfur in bulk, again, is $100 per ton. That's 0.001 cent per gram delivered. And so it's super cheap. To literally reverse global warming, like by 1.5 C, is less than $10 billion per year. I believe the damages from the LA fires alone were north of $100 to $200 billion. Like, we could just reapply the sunscreen year after year. And so, keep going with your thing, because I do. Obviously, I am talking about my own book, but I can dive into why I'm focused on this.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, like, the issue is, like, there are other people who say, like, and like at Hereticon, there were people. I mean, we don't need to go into details, but there were people there that were actually promoting higher CO2 as a good thing. I can't go into details, Chatham House rules, but I mean, they have books. They gave other talks. We know it, and like the greening of the world and fossil fuels are good and all these things. And obviously, I mean, you're not totally on board with all that stuff. The flip side that I will have to say is, you obviously actually do believe it. In terms of, you're devoting your life. You're startup. It's a lot of time, a lot of energy. You're grinding at this project. You're talking to people like me, and like, I'm sure you're reaching out to all these people. Your seed stage startup. You convince some people. Thomas Peo, there's some serious people. Draper Peo, not like random people. It's not just family and friends investing.
Yeah.
So you've obviously convinced some people, and frankly, your basic idea is pretty simple. Here's a question that I have, though. if it's so straightforward and so simple, why isn't this like some international project and not like a former YC alumni is doing a seed stage startup? Like, what's up with that?
Yeah. So people have tried to do this. There was this group out of Harvard called ScopeX, where they got about $20 million from Bill Gates. And they were trying to actually just launch a balloon with calcium carbonate, which is an alternative to sulfur dioxide. And they got blocked because a bunch of NIMBYs said, hey, don't do this in my backyard. They were trying to launch somewhere in Sweden, and the Sami Council, literally reindeer herders, said, like, don't do this. And so they didn't do it. And, this is the reason why I think is because they come from an academic institution, and they don't want to step on people's toes. And at the end of the day, they're not about commercialization. They're about trying to figure out the research around it. And so there has been attempts to do this before, but we're the first to ever try to commercialize it, actually get like paying customers. I can't say who, but there are several people that, are like in the billionaire class that like gave us some dollars to support us. And so these guys are serious people who understand the science, that are supporting us. And hopefully does that kind of answer your question? I want to make sure that, and why isn't the government doing this? Like, quite frankly,
Why isn't it an international consortium? I mean, this is like this is like in a science fiction novel. It would be like an international consortium, but it's not a science fiction novel. Like, why is reality not panning out in the same way?
Exactly. And so the UN discusses this like every once in a while about trying to deploy solar geoengineering or doing research, but no one can decide who should do it. One, because quite frankly, like it's a future problem. At the end of the day, as you had pointed out, this is a thing that is not an immediate thing. More people are worried about putting roofs over their heads and putting food on the table than they are about catastrophic climate events that might happen, that might burn their house down, that might put their house underwater. And so the Maslow's hierarchy of things is just not a priority. I mean, even if you do polling, I believe, like even with like when the presidential election was happening, like climate change was like, I think, barely in the top 10. like more people were worried about national security, immigration, and pandemics than they were about climate change. And so it's a problem that is not a problem until it's right in front of your face. And the thing is that it doesn't, like, climate change is not, it's like, it is all of a sudden, but it's a thing that like, it's like no one realized that the richest part of LA was going to burn down. like, like it's just like, and so why hasn't the government cared about this? Is because, quite frankly, people aren't pushing it. And so that's the thing. The government is not going to save us here. Like, they don't care until the people care. And quite frankly, just not enough people care. And, what we hope to become eventually is become like the SpaceX to NASA. NASA doesn't make their own rockets anymore. Sad fact. Elon does it. We're just the delivery boys. You tell us where to deploy the sulfate aerosols, and you can pay us to do so. We'll send it up on behalf of any country who wants this to happen. We're even talking to some island nations right now who are interested in what we're doing and starting a geoengineering department to essentially help them, like, make a statement saying, listen, like, my island nation is going underwater right now. Like, this is a real thing, that these guys are on the front lines of climate change. Like, they are having like cabinet meetings in scuba gear kind of stuff. Some of it's virtue signaling performative, but like, and some of it's just getting some aid dollars. But like, at the same time too, like, they're getting wiped. They're the first to get wiped out, and so they have an incentive to make some noise.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I immediately was wondering about is like, bro, like, I don't like the word weaponized because it's usually fake, but this could literally be weaponized. Like, you could use this technology to induce a famine in an enemy country.
Doesn't work that way.
Okay, explain.
It's not localized, so that's the beautiful part of this whole thing.
Okay, so but there's a coordination problem then. That's the issue that you're alluding to then. Exactly. I see.
Exactly. Because no one wants to do it, because there's also this free rider problem as well. Like, my bet, honestly, if we don't succeed, India's just going to do it themselves. Again, it costs less than $10 billion. It's going to be a G20 country that just does it. Say, fuck it. Like, there's enough people that are dying from heat stroke. Like maybe the Middle East as well. It's like
Well,
fuck it,
Saudi
Saudi
Arabia,
Arabia. Yeah,
MBS
I
could
mean
fund
people
it.
are
Yeah.
dying from going through the pilgrimage to Hajj. Like they're dropping dead. Like because it's too hot. Like they're just gonna say fuck it, we're gonna do it, and we don't have to coordinate with anybody to do this. So we're the ones who say, hey, let's be the responsible adults here. We're going to start, deploying slowly. We're going to try to get people to vote with their wallets. So this is not a surprise when a government wants to roll this out, saying, hey, we've done this before. We've done a deployment that was measurable with the same as Pinatubo. We safely cooled the planet. Nothing bad happened. Let's do it again. Make census to do it because they've done it. They've gone through all the bullshit to make sure that this is safe, versus some government run program that just says, "Hey, we're panicking now. Like there's revolts happening. There's water shortages. Shit is hitting the fan. We have to panic now and send a shit ton of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen. Like we should prepare for this." And
Yeah,
it's
I
not that
see what you're saying.
and again, it's not that expensive. Like another way to put this is like the Trinity test, right? When we first developed the atomic bond, like yes, we did drop it twice. The U.S. did drop it twice, but like we prepared for this. Like we made sure, like in time when we needed something to deploy, like we should know how to do it safely in the middle of the freaking desert, and test it to see
Yeah.
if it works. So then we can use it when we do need it.
Well, I mean, and as you probably know, obviously they were. I mean, I think it was in the Oppenheimer movie. They were like, they did the math, and they're like 99.8% sure that it's not going to incinerate the whole globe.
Yeah.
Like,
Burn up the atmosphere, right?
yeah, but people are like, but there's a 0.2%. So what you're trying to say is there's a 0.2% chance we're going to end humanity. Well, that's what the math says, which
I don't
probably
know.
they would have.
Yeah.
They would probably have more precise math. I think what the issue is, like, they didn't have like very powerful computers that could do a lot of the calculations. I think it would be like 0 today, but I think within the scope of the coarseness of their methods, that was what the error was.
Right. And the thing is, too, is it could be incremental here, right? We know directionally any amount of SO2 does cool down the planet. And we know this because we currently emit about 69 million tons of sulfur dioxide in the air that we currently breathe. So it used to be 130 million tons back in 1979, and then we dramatically dropped it because the EPA clamped down on it via the Clean Air Act. And so if we keep going down, if we go to 0, that 69 million goes down to 0, we will live in a 1.9 C world. Like we are currently at 1.5, we will live in a 1.9 C world.
And ozone, and that was it. The CFCs that were banned because the ozone hole, and they cooled the world. Yeah.
So the CFCs, what it did is it punched holes into the ozone layer, which then increased UV exposure to the planet. So it was a big, like everyone luckily like said kumbaya and let's hold hands and like ban CFCs. And that was a great thing that we did. We got to do the same thing here with sulfate aerosol, saying, listen, like together we got to band together to actually cool down the planet until we can figure out how to stop burning fossil fuels.
Well, I mean, so what's your let's talk about 1.9. Like, is it feasible to go back to, say, like, I don't know, 1990, 1980, like temperatures with like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, okay. So you've done actually, like, I know you've done the math, like it's in the notes, but like I'm actually just asking you, like I don't.
Yeah.
But let me just pretend I don't.
Yeah. To be clear, though, we're not removing any CO2 from here. So, you talk about like CO2, like there is an optimal amount of CO2 that you need to have like ideal crop growth. Like we're not there yet, but that's the thing. We can actually, like, this is one of the papers that have been written saying that because we actually diffuse the sunlight, we reflect 1 to 2% of the sun's energy, and we also don't touch CO2 levels. There's this thing called carbon fertilization. And so with the diffraction of the light, because a lot of crops don't like growing in direct sunlight, because we diffuse it then. So we are like a natural sunshade for everybody. So the paper said like that you could actually increase crop yield by about 10%. So we're supercharging like plant growth.
Yeah. I mean, so one thing that I'm wondering about though is, I mean, there are arguably some nations like maybe Russia, the Russian Federation, Canada that are benefiting from the warming.
They are.
And so, I mean, does the world like pay these nations a little bit for the fact that they're going to get colder, I mean, because people are like, I have a friend who has invested a lot in Canadian natural resources stocks or whatever, like whatever, like investing, because as the world warms, access to those will be way cheaper and they'll be much more competitive, right? So if you get to do what you want to do, those investments are kaput. So the point is, people, insurance companies, they're already making choices based on global warming. Now, obviously, if we
Yes,
could
yeah.
reverse global warming, I mean, I think everyone would be like, "Oh, that's great." But also there would be some people who would be losers because they were proactive in anticipating
Yeah.
climate change. Does that have you thought about that sort of
Yeah.
fallout?
So what happens then is the rest of the world will continue to burn, and those places where are now a little bit warmer that used to be cold, there's going to be a lot of climate refugees like flooding the gates, and
I
so
see. So
it's
so
not a net positive.
yeah. Okay. So they will benefit because they will not be invaded by
Yeah.
masses of. Yeah, I see.
I'm gonna move up north, dude. My current place where I'm staying right now, like insurance doesn't cover it. Like I cannot get fire insurance right now, even though I live in a fairly like wealthy neighborhood in Silicon Valley. Like they will not cover me. I can't even pay more. I can't even give them more money to cover my place. And so at one point, I'm just gonna have to move north. Maybe I'm the more palpable person to live next to, but there's a lot of people who are not going to be able to have the same luxury as I am, and that's going to put a strain on resources, and I don't think people
Yeah,
want
let
that.
me let me be clear. Like, again, like I have like 40% of my listeners are going to be out of this country. And like I live in Austin, Texas,
Yeah.
which is actually further south. Its average temperature is warmer than where you are, although the winter temperature we do get some cold snaps coming up from the north. But Austin is the southernmost state capital in the lower 48. It's actually south of Tallahassee. It's very warm. It's about we're recording on the 25th of February. It's about 75 degrees outside right now. Okay. But the local ecology, the local climate, this affects this flyer risk. California in particular, it's a beautiful state. I lived there for a decade. I love it. I go back all the time. I think we've seen each other at like social things, like just
Mhm.
in passing, actually.
Yeah.
Um, so, but the issue with California is it's a Mediterranean climatic regime. The rain comes between basically like really like November 15th to maybe like March 1st, like that, time period.
Yeah.
And then during the summer, it dries out, it's hot. And so you have all of this combustible kindle. Where I live, it's a somewhat different regime because we have pretty even rainfall all year. Actually, it's probably a little bit of a spring optimum.
Mhm.
And so during the summer, it's humid and it's moist. The fire risk is low. So the climate here is getting warmer. Everyone in Austin is I'm not a long time. Well, I am a long timer now. I've been here for 9 years, but there are people who've been here for 50 years, and they say, "Oh yeah, winters are just way warmer than they used to be." But the outcome in Austin is quite different than the outcome in California, and so there's all these like local conditions that we're weighing, and I don't live in Saudi Arabia though. I mean, like it does get really hot during the summer, but I don't live in like the deep tropics. I don't live in like a desert, and so I think like people in Texas, for example, it's hot. Lots of it is dry, but reality is like it's not as big of a deal for us because like what we have is like the hurricanes on the coast, and those are very very rare events
Yeah.
relatively.
Yeah.
Hurricane frequency will increase,
Yeah.
and they will come further north just because more energy into the system, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the big thing that analogous to California with the climate change is the coastal people, especially in Florida, right? They cannot get they can't get very well. They can get insurance, but it's kind of like fake insurance now. I know there's weird government subsidies, and
Exactly.
it's all messed up, right?
Yeah. And so it's something where I think what you're touching upon too is like we both live in somewhat temperate climates, and that's why we pay the big bucks for that. But there are places where they face extremes, and that's what climate change is increasing those extremes both on the hot end and the cold end. And so those are the people who are going to suffer the most. Like luckily we are both very fortunate to have the standard of living that we have, but I'm thinking about the guy in India right now. I'm thinking about the guy who's on the island nation with his family, who's like, yeah, this thing is disappearing. Um, those are the people that you got to really worry about. The desperate people that are gonna
Yeah.
make some moves.
Well, so I have a question. Other people you said have tried this, and when I was a startup guy. I mean, mean, I'm still in tech, uh, people ask you weird things. Like, for example, they obviously want you to be the first and the only, but
Yeah.
then they freak out that you're the only person. So maybe you're crazy.
Yeah.
And so, like, where are all your competitors that are going to this potentially big market? Like, have you gotten those sorts of questions?
Oh, sure.
Like, how do you react to that?
Oh, sure. So there is another company called Stardust Solutions. They're based in Israel. They've raised about $15 million, actually. Um, the problem with them is that they're not very transparent about how they're doing this. There was a Wall Street Journal article about them featured the only time that they've ever been featured in a mainstream media piece. Their CEO openly says, we're not going to disclose the particles that we're putting up. We're using proprietary particles to cool down the planet. and since this is something that affects everybody, you cannot be stealth mode about this if you want to talk about startup terms here. This is going to affect everybody. And the strategy that we've come up with and we've been implementing since day one is that we share exactly how much money we have in the bank, what our revenue was, how much money we burned, what we failed at, what we succeeded at, and what we're working on next month. We've been doing that since inception, right? Like, it's a weird, like, I've done a lot of different startups, but like this one requires extreme transparency because we're just trying to build trust here. Like, you'll know, like right now, like our revenue model's like basically kind of a donation based. Like, yes, we are deploying sulfate aerosols into the stratosphere on your behalf. And then you can claim that you offset X amount of tons or something like that. But for the most part, like you should give money to us if we can actually deploy. And if you're seeing at our monthly updates, we post it on a blog. We also have a newsletter. If you see our number dwindling down to zero, like we had 31 months worth of runway right now. If that dwindles down to zero, you should not be giving us any more money. Like straight up, like that means we're dying, and you should be looking into other alternatives. Versus again, this Israeli company, they've got scientists, their CEOs like ex-nuclear Israeli dude. We might have some funding with the IDF kind of thing. Like it's hopefully they succeed. Their whole go to market is maybe just trying to find a government to do this for them as a main customer. But in my opinion, they're going about it the wrong way. They're not being very transparent with it because at the end of the day, the people are part of the government. The people who are the ones to decide who funds what. And if there's not that level of transparency from the get-go, I think there's a huge amount of trust issues. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, I might be wrong about this, but like we live in a world now where like you have access to every single, we have artificial intelligence that can verify all these things. Like you want to be you want to be very forthcoming about what you're doing because there's a lot of people just have trust issues, and so
Yeah.
that's one. Two, I mean, there's some academic institutions that are trying to do more modeling, meaning that they're using the data from 1991 to then try to regurgitate some better models and fine tune these knobs here and there. But we see them more as a partner than a competitor. Like, since we are the only ones actively publicly deploying, eventually we'll get to a scale where this will be measurable by satellite infrastructure. And so then we can then use that data. Again, you don't have to trust us at that point because it's your government dollars at work. These satellites currently detect volcanic eruptions around the world. That's what your tax dollars are paid to do, along with like GPS satellites and stuff. And so you then can see us deploying the sulfate up there and seeing us actually cool the planet. And so that in itself, I think, is like hopefully builds trust. But we're a startup. We're always open to feedback, change our strategy, and all that stuff. But this is, I think, why we've been able to capture a lot of the like people at Hereticon. This is why we were invited to talk there. They, Stardust Solutions didn't come. like they were doing something extremely heretical. Like they should also have been invited, but I just don't think they wanted to share.
That sounds crazy to me to like keep it in stealth when like you're a proprietary chemical that you're gonna spew around
proprietary
the world.
particles. Yeah, exactly. Like I have some ideas of what I think it is, but like I'm sure it's all safe and all that stuff, but it just doesn't earn trust from anybody.
It does. It's gonna trigger like conspiracy theories. So I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, anyway, like we don't need to talk about Stardust because like that can go down a weird path.
Sure.
I guess like as we're closing out, I want to ask you what are the sorts of okay, so I'm sure someone like RFK Jr., for example, is not a big fan of something like this. There are people that you do things naturally, and this is like playing God. Like, like,
Mhm.
what kind of arguments have you gotten, and like how do you respond to them?
So I think the discourse, and this is pretty relevant because I believe even Trump mentioned chemtrails and geoengineering and stuff like that. And so what happens generally in those discourses is there's a lot of mix up. One is the chemtrails conspiracy theory, where people just think right now there are all the planes that you see in the air are just spraying chemicals out. These chemicals like control your mind or make you impotent or make you sick or something like that. And there's various compounds, whatever that is. I don't know exactly what they talk about. So that's pure conspiracy, in my opinion, because to have that kind of coordinated effort where no one is talking about the actual chemicals that are putting in is kind of crazy that people believe this. So that's one just should be completely ignored. However, there is this thing called cloud seeding, and there are startups currently working on promoting rainfall. And so what that does is they're putting silver iodide, which is just silver. It's a silver compound. What it does is it makes the water vapor inside these clouds heavier, so then it actually rains out. And so silver cloud seeding has been around since the 1970s. It's developed by the U.S. government actually. Countries around the world do it to promote rainfall. And so this is finding clouds that look like they're going to rain and then shooting more chemicals into it to then promote that rainfall. We operate at the next level. We're about 30,000 feet higher than that. And so we're not even messing around with like lower atmosphere stuff. We're actually closer to the ozone layer, if that makes sense, which is super high up. It's about 66,000 feet. So, or 20 kilometers for the people outside the US. And so it's super high. And the best way to think about it is like we're just like we're the sunscreen layer on top of everything else. And so it doesn't rain out. Okay. So essentially with cloud seeding, you're manipulating like rainfall patterns and stuff like that by making the rain clouds heavier so then they actually fall out where you want it to fall. We operate at a higher level. So there's just confusion about what is considered geoengineering here. We both actually, and this even makes it more confusing, we're in full compliance with the law right now and regulations. So both cloud seeding and geoengineering, specifically what we do is called solar radiation management. They both actually fall under the Weather Modification Act of 1976 by NOAA. And so like we're under this umbrella, which makes sense, but we are in different parts of the atmosphere here.
I have an idea. It's just like listening to you guys, and I know, was it Augustus Doricko?
There
I
you go.
know
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
Like
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, good guy.
yeah. So I know Augustus. Like I've hung out with him. I knew him before he was famous, but
Yeah.
before before the mullet became infamous and famous. But he came to Austin. Like I think one of his VCs is in. I know actually one of the VCs I think the funded was in Austin. So he was in for like some social event, and this was like 3 years ago. We hung out for a while, but and I've met him like in other contexts as well. But I love the Gundo guys. So as we're closing, I was just like thinking like this company and like this whole space. It's like someone should start a company called Zeus. Like Zeus Climate, because it's like you're talking like okay, you're trying to do like sky god stuff, right? Like the sky god that controls like the weather and the warmth and the rain and all these things. And I think I think it's cool, but I when I was a kid I read science fiction. This is not like shocking to me. I think like from a PR perspective, as it's going to be a little bit to convince normal people who are electing these governments and whatnot, because it's like, it's like common air that we breathe, the common sun that we see, and most of us until recently were peasants, and peasants are very conservative and they don't want to mess with the weather, don't do anything weird. So, everything that you have said and like, the material that you, showed me, it's quite rational. I'm not necessarily saying that like this is gonna happen. We'll see. We'll see where we
See.
go.
See.
But it's a pretty clear and coherent message. It's just that I'm seeing like I'm anticipating, and I'm sure you see this like instinctive like
Knee-jerk
kind of like
reaction.
knee jerk, not necessarily revulsion, but like fear,
Mhm.
fear. And so but as the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. We are dealing with changes in this world, And how we deal with it, that's on us. Like, we could just like sit here and pretend like nothing is happening, or we could kind of like grasp history by the horns and kind of try to ride it and like make it work for us. And you brought this up in your notes, and like, this is the truth. I mean, there's been whole books written about this. We've been geoengineering for tens of thousands, at least since the rise of agriculture, right?
Oh yeah.
So agriculture and crops have transformed the face of the planet. There's some people who argue that actually our interglacial, the Holocene, is being extended because of agriculture, the release of CO2 earlier on with the cutting down of forests and all these things. So this is not really that new. It is just scientific, is what I would
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
and directed.
Exactly. It's directed, and we're doing it on purpose instead of on accident. And hey, you have AC in your car. You're influencing the weather inside of there. You have AC in your house. There are things that are happening outside in tents with patio misters. That's all we're doing. We're just doing it at a higher level.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a higher level, but also, you have an intent here. I don't know, like, if you guys think of yourself as like, what is this, like, social impact startups? Would you say you're a social impact startup? Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of activism, a little bit of capitalism mixed in there, but
Yeah, yeah. I
it's
mean, you saw an opportunity, you went for it. Like, this is like the standard thing that people say. Yeah. So as we're closing out, just like tell the listener your company's name, where they can find it, and stuff like that. Just so because like, I do have tech people, investors, possible business partners that do listen to this podcast. I know you're out there.
yeah,
So just like get your name out there again, Andrew.
sure. Thanks for listening. My name is Andrew Song. I'm the co-founder of Make Sunsets. You can find us on www.makesunsets.com. We're just trying to cool down the planet. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I mean, I would say something cheesy like, "You're a cool guy, Andrew," but you laughed. You thought it was funny. You went to abuse my. That's how the next talk you give, a public talk, be like, "My friend Andrew, he's a cool operator."
Hey man, I'll take it. We've been called worse, so I take it.
Yeah, no. So it's great talking to you. This is like scratching the surface. Obviously, like we could have a longer conversation, but I feel like this is something that people think they know about, they don't know about, and you're taking a new direction to the topic, and whether it works or not, like, I'm totally in favor of taking big risks and innovating and doing new things. Like, that's what we do in a technological civilization, and like it or not, that's where we are. We don't live in the Shire no more. I'm sorry. And we just gotta. I mean, as you said, like India, for example, or China, even now, they're not going to shut down their coal-fired plants. They're not going to not industrialize. They're going to
No,
do it. And
no.
so, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this new world and this new reality? That's what you're addressing. You're addressing the reality that we have, not the reality we might want. And I think that is the fundamental problem. If I want to complain about the IOCC or like whatever the scientific response is that I've
Yeah.
seen from a lot of scientists,
It's
they
sad.
want a world that we're not going to get. Right? It's never going to happen. So
It's degrowth or bullshit. It's degrowth or bullshit, and
yeah.
it's a suicide pact that I don't want to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into the degrowther thing because we're closing out here, but like, I think the big thing with degrowther is it would bring alive, it would bring the population bomb to reality, because the degrowth mindset would probably result in like a lot of productivity decrease in agriculture and other things.
Yeah.
Like we use fertilizers are from fossil fuels, etc.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we use fertilizer to grow green revolution, and it would bring a lot of famine, a lot of starvation, and it's not a path that anyone really is choosing. So we got to adapt and deal with the path that that we have chosen, no matter how fearful it is for us. Right?
Exactly. We cannot get off the bus.
Yeah.
We got to put the pedal to the metal.
All right, man. It was great talking to you. And I will see you around next time I'm in the Bay.
Yeah, man. Great connecting.
Right,
Thank
bye.
you so much. Bye.
This podcast for kids